Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of FEA's My Facility podcast, where we dive into the latest innovations, trends, and solutions in facilities planning and management. We will bring you conversations with industry experts, innovators, and thought leaders to help you navigate the challenges and opportunities in managing your facilities. At FEA, we're committed to building excellence where we live, work, and play. So if you're looking to stay ahead of the curve and improve your asset management strategy or facility financial planning, you're in the right place. So let's jump in and unlock the secrets to smarter facility planning in today's episode.
Well, hello, Ryan. Thank you for meeting with me today and being on the first episode of My Facility podcast.
First of many.
First of many. So just for the audience, I'll introduce myself. I'm Maureen Roskoski. I'm a vice president at FEA. I've been with FEA for many decades, a couple decades, and very happy today to be talking with Ryan Small, one of my colleagues, about a new software tool that FEA has launched.
I am Ryan Small. I have been with FEA for, on and off for probably 15 years, but the last 5 or 6 years I've been here helping to develop tools like My Facility Plan. So it's been a great place to come back and jump in. So I am also a vice president at FEA, and I specialize in products and programs.
Yep, and Ryan is one of our data gurus who helps us manage all of the data that we deal with our clients and their facilities. So just kind of thinking big picture, Ryan, I know this has been something you have worked on for a long time, and you are one of the creators of this, the brainchilds behind this. So what really inspired you to create My Facility Plan?
So My Facility Plan was really I'll say an evolution of what we had been doing in a really manual way. So at FEA, we interact with a lot of clients to do facility planning. Part of that is to forecast what all of their future needs are financially so that they can get a sense for the implications of funding at different levels, or kind of what funding do they really require to facilitate the missions of their organizations. And there's a lot that goes into that in terms of doing the forecasting, figuring out, what's going to occur in what years based off of your portfolio of buildings, and, maybe on different campuses, maybe you've got different building types, but all of this comes into this one big forecast. And then you're kind of stuck if you've done it manually. And when I say manual, I mean in, an Excel spreadsheet or an Access database, or, like maybe some of the CMMS tools, they kind of spit out this one snapshot and you go, okay, great. I know what the next 10 years looks like. But then you go back to your desk and you have to decide, well, but I'm not going to do a project in year 7. I need to do it in year 4. Like, that building's falling apart. So a lot of the pushing and the pulling and designing of that plan is really cumbersome when you want to facilitate the implications of that push and pull on all the other things. So what does the rest of your kind of stream of needs look like when you do a push and a pull? So we started doing that manually for folks maybe a decade ago, really seriously. And when we did the manual pushing and pulling, we were finding that it was something our clients wanted to do for themselves. What we found was we could teach people, but if it took them 1 year to get up to speed, another year to feel comfortable with it, and then in the 3rd or 4th year they got promoted or they moved on to a different organization, then we have to go back and say, well, we're starting all over again. Or more likely, a client's going to say, actually, FEA, can you just do it this year? And then, and then train somebody and they can do it next year. And so we went through this whole process of what can we do to really help organizations do this for themselves, or help us facilitate doing it for them. So it was really accessible. It was something that could be done, more quickly, more visually, rather than all kind of database backend spreadsheets, and in a way that was secure. It was, a much more stable platform. So we said, all right, we need to take a step back and we need to develop this from the ground up. We need to do it in, a proper sort of enterprise software setting, real databases, real user interfaces. And so we took, maybe 4 years to create this piece of software that on the surface looks super simple by design. That was the whole point, make it look easy. But it brings together all of those pieces that took so many hours across so many different, other pieces of software when we were doing it manually, and puts it all into one nice package. We lived the manual data entry, data manipulation, creating of the reports, creating of the plans, trying to share it with people, trying to train people. And we have found that, what may have taken 4-day training period is now cut down to like a couple of hours to show somebody how to use the software well, and to get them to a point where they can tell their story really efficiently.
Yeah, so it sounds like it really started with convenience and maybe, to ease a little bit of that pain, both on our side as consultants and our clients. Yeah, I know when we do condition assessments, especially the bigger portfolios, and there's a lot of time and effort spent both by us and the client team, and you turn it over and you're like, yay, here you go. And they're like, great, now how do I change it?
Yeah.
Right? Because
Day
just like you
one.
said,
Okay, great. How do we change it?
yeah, things change all the time. We need to, things, we replaced this system, we did that. So that's really how this is different from the work order management system, CMMS or IWMS, that most of our clients have some sort of tool like that. This one's really more about the financial forecasting and being able to, like you said, plug and play, push and play, move projects around. Is that how you see really the big difference?
Yeah, so when I think about, a computerized maintenance management system, CMMS, or an integrated work order management system, IWM system, it is really the day-to-day operators that are working with those computer systems, right? And there's a space in the planning process where that kind of leaves off, and you either need to get a bunch of data out of there to start analyzing and making sense of and creating a plan with, uh, or you end up with something that's quite static and quite compartmentalized. So you're only going to be looking at the things that you have put into your CMMS system. And typically, the stuff that ends up in those systems is dynamic equipment, right? It's the things that you're actually going to be maintaining within an in-house workforce, or with a kind of your services, tradespeople. And there's nothing wrong with having that in a CMMS system. We love that. It's great. It's what you should be using it for. Every facilities organization needs something like this to function well. But the problem is you tend to, I think, lose the forest for the trees sometimes when you're doing planning, starting at that kind of a level or with that kind of equipment inventory. And so what my facility plan was designed to do was to say, let's just take a step back. Let's look at the big picture. Let's, look at the entire hierarchy of what your assets are. So, yes, you need all the dynamic equipment, but you also need to think about the fact that your building envelope is going to get replaced at some frequency. Your roof is going to get replaced at some frequency. These are things, all your finishes, right? How often do you see carpeting in a CMMS system? Not that often, if I'm going to be honest with you. So there are these things that, as facility managers, we go, well, yeah, obviously we're going to replace that stuff. But if it only shows up on, next year's budget because that's when you realized you needed to replace it, and it doesn't show up 6 years later, and then 6 years later, and then 6 years later, you're missing that kind of stream of what's needed to get a really good sense for what the financial picture looks like at your organization. And so a lot of this is not so much, do you need a CMMS system, or do you need an IWIM system, or something like my facility plan, which lets you do this kind of long range strategic planning. It's more like, both and, right? I mean, you need these things together. They work in concert to create this more holistic picture. And when you're going to ask for funding, or you're going to kind of your capital allocators, right? The people who are giving you the money to do things in facilities. I have not met with many CFOs that are like, "Oh, actually, can you break down which boiler it is that you are replacing in year 12?" No, they don't. That's not where their head's at. They have, a much higher level of thinking. So they want to see streams. They want to see, give me a percentage of, how much I need to fund every year, or give me a number that I need to escalate every year. They want something that's pretty high level, and they want you to have the data to back it up, but they want you to give a simple story.
Yeah.
So this is kind of what that's for, right? It's like, okay, there's this aspect of what we do as facility managers that sits kind of above the day-to-day maintenance stuff. You need that. You need that to function. That's how the job gets done every day. But you also need to be able to communicate pretty easily with your stakeholders. Uh, what does the financial picture of your organization look like? And that's kind of where this sits.
Part of the reason consultants exist is to help amplify the message that a lot of facility managers, maintenance directors have been saying for years and years and years. Hey, we need more staff. We need more funding for our building systems. And you've mentioned a couple of times how this tool can help tell that story, give those people more information, more data to be able to tell that story. That seems to be one of the key features.
Yeah, so we thought long and hard about how is this kind of going to work best, and in what scenarios do we see our clients, or just organizations that we're involved in, best utilize information to achieve some objective. Typically, within facilities, that objective is, I actually need to fund my facilities program, because in the 15 years that I've been in and around facilities, I've yet to see a portfolio that came to me that said, actually, I've got all the funding I need. Money's not an issue. Uh, you know, very, very, I shouldn't say that. One time. So I've,
I've
you know,
had one
I've probably
also.
having thousands of different, organizations. One time I've seen it. Hats off to them. Very well done. I won't name them because nobody needs to go hit them up for money. But boy, oh boy, it was a surprise. So they had very different uh, issues that they were working on. But most of the time, the idea is, I need to tell a story, because what I have been doing to date has been reactive, and I go day in and day out putting out fires, and every year I say, I need this stuff to get replaced, and my boss says, well, I can give you 80% of that because that's what we've got. And it's difficult without having a really compelling data driven story to describe what happens when every year you get 80% of what you are asking for. Very, very few organizations are going every year and thinking out 10 years, 20 years into the future and deciding what needs to get replaced at what frequency, and conveying the implications of not replacing those things to stakeholders. We have found that often they need a little help getting that story together. And so when we were thinking about how do we design my facility plan to work best, we thought, you need this software platform that allows you to manipulate all of the data. You actually need a place to like house everything, to do the math, to create the charts. And then, at least to some extent, you need somebody who's seen a lot of different organizations, compelling with compelling stories, go and get money, because you need to be able to bridge that with your facility, and kind of this design of, hey, let's create a compelling narrative. And so we said, all right, given how we're going to create my facility plan, let's pair these things. So anytime anybody buys my facility plan, there's sort of this base level of, hey, no matter what, you're going to get a consultant that has spent, many years building out these narratives to help you navigate this journey of I've got a bunch of facilities data to I have now created this compelling narrative that I can go to a funding board and say, this is what we need. And if you don't give it to us, this is what happens. Right. So it was kind of the design was always this two-part system. Um, and if you do one or the other, it just doesn't ever seem to work as well. Let's create this really compelling story that's data driven and visual to some extent, right? That you can kind of go and give to a board that they'll understand really fast, because you don't get a lot of time often with folks. You can't sit down for 2 days and walk through mountains of data. You may get an hour, you may get 30 minutes, so you need some quick punches. You need to be able to say, hey, look, this is what happens when you don't fund at the right levels. Our buildings fall apart, and they fall apart this quickly. I can explain to you exactly how fast that happens.
And so it's kind of neat to hear you say that about we've got to have the good data. We've got to have a tool that helps us explain that data, but then we also have to have the ability to be able to communicate and tell that story well to the money allocators. That's one of my favorite phrases you use.
At the end of the day, we do need money to facilitate our organization. And, we're working in physical spaces. These things degrade over time. They need to be maintained. And sometimes we just take for granted that buildings stand up, right? It's like, well, they stand up if you take care of them. So,
Yeah. What else have you seen for folks? I know you've worked with utilizing this software with people. What are the other results? Like, what's the end result that you see when someone really is able to pull it all together?
there's two kind of compelling outcomes. One is you have a clear articulation of your funding needs and the implications of what happens when you don't get funded at that level. So you can see over time very clearly, I'm just underfunding every year. I'm going to need to push things off every single year. Well, that's problematic because at some point you can't push things off any longer. So being able to articulate that for the next 20 years or 30 years or whatever your planning period is, it raises the level of awareness of the money allocators a lot. Say, oh, we can't just fund at 80% continually and hope for the best because eventually something breaks, right? So that's problematic. The other major positive outcome is there's a pretty material shift from a reactive nature to a proactive nature just by virtue of being aware of what's coming up. Typically the way that we recommend people work with my facility plan is you have a planning period and we say let's do two things. Let's figure out what projects you did over the course of the year and what systems that impacted, what buildings those impacted. Did you do everything that you thought you were supposed to do? Yes or no? If you did, great. Let's, notate that. We'll reforecast. Done. If you didn't, what needed to get pushed off? Is that still a high priority? Is it on fire? What's going on? And also, what did we need to do in this upcoming year? Is anything going to get pushed off? Did anything get pulled forward? Are we seeing something that we thought was going to get replaced in year 5 that now needs to get replaced next year? That kind of push and pull process in the near term results in a lot fewer fire drills. And then you're also kind of, wrapping these two things together. You're able to say, all right, let's take care of the very near term, and then let's figure out what the implications of doing what near term projects have on the kind of intermediate term, because that gets looped back into the story that we are telling the money allocators, right? So those are the two things that I kind of show most often as saying this is what success looks like. Fewer fires, fewer surprises, and a compelling data-driven narrative.
Yeah, and so we're finding that clients are able to either get more money, right? They're able to tell that compelling story so they can get the right amount of funding for their facility needs, or at least the organization has the data to use that to say, we're going to make a risk-based decision. You've told us we understand. So here's we're willing to accept that risk for another year. So it sounds like, one, the best case scenario is that people are able to increase their funding or at a minimum get more stable funding. But also from an organizational level, they're making smarter decisions with better data too.
The goal is to help the money allocators make the decision. You need to present all of the information to the money managers or the money allocators in a compelling way so that they really do understand what happens if you do not, fund at a given level. So when I work with a lot of clients and they say, "Oh yeah, we 4x'd our budget after we were able to present the data in a really compelling way." Okay, that's a major difference in your facilities organization.
So I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball.
Oh
One
boy.
of my favorite podcasts is Smartless. Do you know that podcast?
No, this is new to me.
Okay, so it's Sean Hayes. You know him from Will and Grace many, many
Yep.
years ago. Will Arnett and Jason Bateman. And they are all good friends outside of acting, right? So they've been good friends for years. And it's fun because it really comes across. It honestly feels like just a conversation with the three of them kind of riffing on each other.
Yeah.
But Sean Hayes has a theater background and he's a singer and an amazing piano player, has won a Tony, all that stuff. Well, his favorite question to ask for anyone who's been in theater is, do you have any funny theater stories? Like, tell me all the things that messed up, weird things that have happened while you were on stage. So I'm just curious, I was thinking about this, if you've got any funny development stories, like you wrote a line of code and it put out like some weird word, or you put something in and it changed all the colors in there to something different, or if there's even anything funny over the development of this that
so software engineers in general are like an interesting bunch, right? If you don't know one, this will be maybe a surprise. If you do know one, it won't be. But we were working with this group of software engineers, and I said something about a piece of software that I had used, oh geez, I don't know, 10 years ago, something like that. And they just started chuckling. I'm like, what is going on? Because we're in a meeting, right? This is like we're not in just a bar, and he's just sitting there chuckling. I'm like, what in the heck? And so finally, I say, what is so funny? I mean, this is going on for minutes. And he said, what was so famous about this piece of software was if you clicked certain buttons, there would be like a T-Rex that would pop out, or a Brachiosaurus that would like come across the bottom of the screen. And he had put a few of those Easter eggs in my facility plan in the development stage. And so he was like, "Oh yeah, did you do this yet?" And I was like, "No, I did not do this." So I went and do it on the site, and I just see boom, like a T-Rex pop up right
wow.
in center screen. I laughed. We took it out, but I was like, "Oh man," part of me wanted to leave it in, right? It was like, "This is great." So there's a few little things like that it was just it's been really fun to kind of work through the steps.
Yeah, and you got to find the times to laugh. I kind of wish you had kept it in too. I would love to be working on something, boom, T-Rex pops up. That would be fun.
Maybe we'll put it in the next release.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for everything today, Ryan. We appreciate it. And I'm, excited to keep working on this with you and see what we can do.
Awesome. Thanks, Maureen.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks for tuning in to My Facility Podcast. We appreciate you joining us and hope you found today's discussion valuable. Stay connected for our next episode. And if you have any comments, questions, or topic suggestions, we'd love to hear from you at info@feapc.com. See you next time.